am in a school now as well. So you can probably hear.
No, not much, to be honest. I mean,
oh, good.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Anna Hackett. Hi, Anna. How are you?
Hello. Well, thanks.
Now, this is your first time on the podcast. We're going to explore curriculum, leadership, professional learning, but I thought it might make sense if you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Yep. I'm so excited to be here. It's really strange. And I also thought you recorded the introduction like before the podcast, but now to hear it live, that's amazing. Okay, I am currently I've started a new role in January. I'm the curriculum and professional learning lead for Focus Trust. We are a primary based trust. We've got 15 schools in the Northwest and Yorkshire, over 6,000 children, sort of 900 plus staff, so huge. So I started in January. Prior to that, I've been a teacher for about 14 years. Always just absolutely, it's in my heart. And prior to that, I was an ETA in a high school, working one-to-one with children with SEND, and that taught me a lot as well. So yeah, quite a journey that I've been on. But in terms of where I am now, I think it's one of the biggest challenges in my career, but exciting.
And you spend a lot of time thinking really carefully about the decisions you make, the support you can provide for your teachers. And so that's why obviously I was really keen to try and get the chance to chat with you. Now, you mentioned you joined in January, so roughly 6 months in post. What are some of the principles that have guided you and perhaps some of the things that you've learned along the way?
So I think I do think a lot about everything. It's one of my things. And I think that before I applied to go into this role, I always had that passion and that love for teaching. But also I'd had quite a mixed experience in terms of school improvement and school development. Almost had an experience within an LA school where we were very much in a situation where we'd kind of lost our voice. And I'm sure like quite a few people can relate to that style of school improvement, where you're almost done to. You're in that situation where you're trying so hard, but there's so many things out of your control. And that's really shaped how I work with people now, because it can't be underestimated how you make people feel and how you connect with them. So I think for me, one of my guiding principles, or my first one, would be that connection. And it's almost, I'm not the expert in any school that I work in. I'm not. It is the leaders in that school, the teachers in that school. They are the experts of that school. And I think I'm gradually starting to see there's a shift in how people work with schools that need that development, in terms of giving them their voice, their power. I think that I would be really foolish to go walk into a school and think that I know everything, because every school is unique and every school is different. So for me, it's my job to listen, and listen to understand, not listen to reply, which I think is different. And again, I can see it's nobody's fault, but I can see previously what has possibly happened where you're seen as an expert in one school and then you're promoted or you're asked to go and work with other schools and you try and apply what worked in that school to this school, but it doesn't work like that. And I think for me, you have to start with the staff and the leaders there and connect with them and their thinking and what they know about where they work. And because people matter, it sounds a bit cheesy really, but I strongly believe that people matter. So when you go somewhere, you go to a school, I love going to all the schools in our trust. They are just like, everyone is like a magical sort of playground adventure. It's just beautiful. Everyone is unique and individual. And it's almost my job then to explore that. It's never a deficit. I think that we can too often think that schools are a deficit if they look different or if they don't have certain things. So for me, that connection is really important. I think as well, in terms of another like guiding principle, in our trust we have all the schools have autonomy, so over their curriculum, so it is down to them to make those decisions. And again, I feel that that's the right decision for us because all of our communities are different, and our vision is to have great schools at the heart of our communities. So for me, one of the challenges is how do I connect with them when everything's different? And that to me is one of the sort of biggest hurdles that I've found. So almost having those shared principles around curriculum design. I know that did some work with you on maths, and almost coming to a shared agreement, a shared understanding, so that then they can say, right, okay, these are the principles for curriculum design, for example. I can take that and I can apply that into my school, into my setting, and giving space for that. Mary Myatt talks about how things need to be fit for purpose and the idea of beautiful resources and beautiful learning. And for me, that's the same for when you're working with schools. So having shared principles would be sort of my second guiding principle, really. And then I guess the last one is just being honest and being transparent. I am who I am. This is me. Not to break out into song, but this is how I am, and to be vulnerable as well. I don't have all the answers, but I will do my very best to help schools and help leaders find out the right path. I was given a really, really good piece of advice by Rachel Higginson, and I just got into this role a couple of months in, and you're almost having that imposter syndrome, like everybody does, I'm guessing, but nobody really talks about it that much. And I was reading every single book that I could find. So I was going to work with history leaders. So I was reading every primary history podcast, like blog, anything. That was kind of like my mentality. And I almost had to stop and think, hang on a minute, this isn't possible. Nobody is an expert in everything. I spoke to Rachel and she said, just pause and lean into what you know. Lean into your experience, lean into all those years where you've had successes but you've made mistakes, and lean into almost like that intuition that we have as teachers to read the room. So I think those would be sort of my three guiding principles.
They really resonate with me, the people matter in particular, because knowing your context, this context of your schools, you've really got to want to work there, and so no one's there for the easy ride or for the, just to phone things in. And so, yeah, putting them first and saying, okay, we'll invest in you and then everyone will get a good deal as a result, I think really makes sense. And the autonomy is brave, I think. I'm trying to think, if I were in your position, would I mean, I had three schools in my last sort of school-based project, and they all use different curricula, but I definitely had my preference for
Yeah.
which one they should be using.
And
So
in that way, you kind of have to you have to leave some of your preferences at the door when you walk in. I think that's again why, to me, it's a privilege that they let you in and they want you to work with them, and it's that. But it is difficult. It's almost like I'm having to train myself to think, right, okay, what are the shared principles? It's not about my approach and me. It's about making sure those shared principles are in place. But it's also something that was there before I joined. So I think I'd be an absolute rebel if I wouldn't be very popular at all. And it's not what I believe in. So as a teacher, I would not like at all for somebody to almost like come in and dictate to me what I was teaching. I feel like I'm a bit of a quiet rebel in that way, because you have to read the room, don't you? You have to go with what you know as a teacher. So I do feel like that autonomy is really important, but then it's a challenge then to bring people together.
yeah, I can see the manipulative work we did. We looked at guiding principles for their use based on research, didn't
Yeah.
we? And I can see how that actually fits really well with your approach to leadership across the trust, because we didn't explore which manipulatives to use, but we said, okay, if you're going to choose them, here are the things you need to have in mind. So I can see that applying across many other subjects. And I think you're absolutely right about no one being an expert in everything. Because when Chris and Neil and stuff, whenever they're having like their WhatsApp conversations about reading, there has to be a point where I have to tap out, because I'm never going to have that amount of expertise in both mathematics and reading. And so I'm sort of like, okay, you guys far ahead, because I understand, I've obviously listened to them both talking about literacy a lot. And so I
Mm.
remember what they say and I understand what that might look like and things. But I'm not going to try and compete with them in terms of, do I have a position that's counter to their, no, there's no chance, because, like you said, there aren't enough hours in the day.
No, and if one person knew absolutely everything, where would they do their thinking? Do you know what I mean? Like for me, I love learning just generally in life, because it's about the thinking, it's about the process of thinking and the way that you connect with other people. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's no headspace for everything.
You mentioned their part of your role is about curriculum development across schools. Can you describe your experience with developing and implementing curricula? And perhaps you can choose a specific example, or the general gist across all the subjects, but I know there are a lot of subjects.
Okay, well, this kind of fits in with sort of my first beautiful challenge of this role. Again, I've got 15 schools, all fiercely passionate about their curricula, all unique and beautiful. How do I connect with them? And then how do I then use that connection to move things forward? So what I did was we had a curriculum leaders conference. So we asked Emma Turner to come, and she delivered again some key principles around the curriculum. I'd already read Emma's books, Simplicitous, and I'd applied some of her thinking to schools that I'd worked in previously. So when I was an assistant head, when I was English leader, I'd had involvement in developing a curriculum on a school scale rather than a 15 school scale. So I kind of I understood it more myself. But again, having Emma come, again, it's that fresh eyes, and it's a shared point of reference for everybody. And I think that's really key. It's not about me and what I think and my personal preferences. It's about, can we find a shared principle, a shared point of reference? So Emma came, and It was a really, really positive day. And every school could see something in the messages that she was saying. She uses a lot of analogies in her work, and I think that makes it easier again for staff to understand. So she talked about things like the tree in winter for like your subject integrity, like the train model for your progression. And what that meant was that then we almost had, between me and the 15 schools, a shared language. So we were starting to develop a shared language around curriculum and around the different components of curriculum, because we'd all had that day in April where she delivered those messages and explored them with us. Um, so that was really key for me, almost to sort of establish those links. And then what I did was I had a series of TLCs. So we run like teaching and learning communities as part of our trust. So I had a series of those where I invited the subject leaders from each subject. So you said maybe don't go into each subject because it might be a bit much. Well, I did. so we had all the history leaders came together and I led that session, and then all the geography leaders came together and I led that session. And that was important for me because then what I could do was share the overarching curriculum messages from Emma Turner and the curriculum conference and filter that through into the subject networks so that they were hearing those messages but through their subject lens. So we looked at the purpose of study from the national curriculum. We went through the pedagogical approaches that you can take for geography. How is that different to history? How is that different to science? I had all my beautiful books because I'm a big fan of picture books and storybooks and everything. And we just explored the subjects together. And I think that primary subject leaders almost don't always get that training, that investment and those conversations. So I've just come to almost the end, and you were kind enough to join us on the maths one. And that to me feels like everyone has heard those messages, but it's been bespoke to them, to their we talk about moral purpose in our trust and what is your moral purpose. And for me, it was, you're a history lead, right? What's your moral purpose in your school as a history lead? And you're the cheerleader of that subject, aren't you? You're going to make sure that everybody absolutely loves it. So that was almost a way of filtering that support and those messages down, which again was positively received on the whole.
I was going to say you've essentially built this space for these leaders to think about their subject, which, like you say, they don't always get. Was what was the response? What did they think? And do you have plans to increase that, or just continue this in the same vein next year?
So I think what the feedback from staff was very much like this was needed. Again, the national curriculum being talked about, isn't it, at the moment, and a review on the national curriculum. So I'm excited to see what comes with that. But I think that in terms of primary schools, I don't know whether we've always had that investment in the individual subjects. So too often, you're given a subject and then you don't necessarily have the time to really immerse yourself in it and really understand what makes it tick. So that was a welcomed sort of network in order to do that, and in order to allow staff to ask questions about how they might use timelines in history, or share different ideas for task design in geography. In terms of what we do with it next, so we I think like a lot of schools we use Teams, so we have networks set up on that. So again, that's encourage people to share ideas, share different documents. We get a bit bogged down in documents, don't we? Like we get stuck in these documents, but actually if we can share things like that, then we can spend more time on the things that like we really love, like being in the classroom and helping teachers. And so that's one of the products of those meetings. I think also next year the plan is, as a trust, we're having collective inset days. So they're called collective learning days. So this is where all 15 schools have an inset day on the same day. And we are going to come together across 8 sites, so 8 different schools, and build on the networks that we've had this term. So that to me is really exciting, because then again, you can have history leaders coming to one place, geography leaders, or if you're interested in leading geography in the future, you can go to another place and get that bespoke training, that professional development almost. So it seems to get bigger, the plans.
That sounds fantastic. It's really ambitious, and I think it will be really valuable. I mean, how is the usage with Teams? I remember way back 2016, 17, trying to get all my year 3 teachers and across different schools and across my year 4 teachers to use this one folder, but it wasn't necessarily intuitive. Maybe the pandemic has changed that.
Yeah.
Do you find that's a really efficient way to, or
yeah.
I'm sure others are available?
I think so. Especially sort of you have your teams within your schools, but then we have like a trust-wide teams. So that's where we can have like your subject leader network. And again, it's something that, it's habits, isn't it? Everything about working with staff and children, it's habits. So sometimes it can get a bit much, too many pings on Teams. So you have to be mindful about what you're sharing. But yeah, I think for me, it's a useful place to almost like signpost people to and get that one message out. So I do find it useful.
For all of you Kofi, Ko-Fi, Ko-Fu-Fu, however you pronounce it, you damn lovely supporters. It's a song going out to you, to you. Okay, here we go. Nikki, Anna P, Septi, Stephanie Taylor, Mrs. B, Esatea, Adam, Katie, Liv, Dempsey, Becca, Jenford, Susie, Brown, andCio, Netchio, Rachel, I am Al, Jessica, Tom Oakley, Tom Brassington, Jessica, Tom Oakley, Tom Brassington, LJ, and last but not least, my lovely little Amy Bill. So they help us pay the bills. Oh, a massive thank you out to Dappy family. Coffee supporters help us keeping it ad-free. There's far more content coming just round the bend. Thank you all for helping our very special friends. Very special friends.
How do you incorporate feedback from teachers and students into curriculum? I mean, we've always almost started to feed into this. How do you take what they say about their lived experience of the curriculum and make things better?
So I think that's, I guess, a bit like when I started saying about connection. It is about reading the room and about looking for that kind of information. I'm not really one that's focused on outcomes in terms of data necessarily. It's more about the process for me. So in terms of what those teachers tell me, again, off the back of the work that I do with schools and the TLCs that we've run, we've identified that literacy and language is a key area for ongoing development. I know that there's currently the Oracy Commission where they're looking into almost what our approach needs to be, and there's so many layers to it. So that was something that I think all groups of people that I worked with were almost telling me that it's around that literacy and language oracy. And again, I think working at scale, you need to look at things almost like a layered approach, like a tiered approach. So I would have almost like you bespoke one-to-one support, but then what can we do trust-wide that supports literacy and language? So on these collective learning days next academic year, we are focusing on one strand of literacy and language, so building vocabulary. What is our approach to vocabulary, right from early years all the way through to year 6 and beyond? But that one thread running through, and it'll weave through, like I said, history, geography, science, but we've all had that shared input around literacy and language. That to me means that I am listening to what staff are telling me, what teachers are telling me, what leaders are telling me, what I see from with my own eyes from in the classrooms. But then again, it's meaningful. And I think it's kind of like when I was working in schools and I was leading English, I would read the room and talk to staff, and then you would have your staff meeting, but then you've got your ongoing support in the background. And to me, that's what this will be. You have those collective learning days, but then my ongoing support with schools will be around, okay, how are we developing literacy and language within different contexts, within different subjects? It just, to me, keeps it you're going to have much more of an impact if you focus on one thing rather than trying to do everything.
That sustained over time support, little and often, it works in the classroom, it works in schools. It's probably the almost the closest thing to a surefire way to improve things. But also the if everything's your priority, nothing's your priority. So it'd be really interesting to see what your sort of booklet that you've made this year for how things have gone looks like after a year focusing on language and literacy. You said you're not focused on data, you're focused on process, which I think is brilliant. Do you have the backing of your most senior leaders on that? Or are you, is that part of your rebellious nature? Because you're, in my opinion, I've always had to be this person going, that's not statistically valid.
So I think it is part of my rebellious nature. I am a quiet rebel. Like, I'm not like, and I do bake as well. So I find that the two go hand in hand, quiet rebel and cake. I just feel a bit like, again, I've worked in education for long enough now to see where almost like energies have been misplaced. And I've seen where leaders in schools I've worked at years and years ago have chased data, and I've almost felt I didn't fully understand it. It's not that I don't understand data, but I didn't understand what they were chasing, because to me, like, I come at it from that teacher point of view. So I come at it from that, it's that formative data, reading the room. What do your children tell you? What are your staff telling you? It's all of that. And that's the process. So to me, it's about the process. So I'm reading at the moment this book. It's called Formative Action. And it is about that, the process of how you they say formative action instead of formative assessment. And again, it's a habit that you have as a teacher. So how are you reading the room, and then what are you doing and how are you acting on it? There is a place for data, and I understand again that there are sort of those pressures that are on leaders, and again, it really frustrates me, because I think that they deserve to almost be able to invest their energies in their school and in their classrooms and in their staff. And the worry that comes with data, I think that's almost unnecessary. Again, you mentioned earlier about the schools that we work in, that we serve. They come with significant challenges, and sort of having those data expectations, that doesn't help the challenges. It adds another challenge. So to me, it's a lot about the process of learning, the process of teaching, the process of developing in school, and the outcome will come from that, and it will be beautiful because we will have invested in the process. And I'm hopeful as well that over time, the powers that be, so not those senior to me, but those senior to me, we'll see that, and the system will reflect that, and we'll see a change for the good. Yes, you need exams and you need those measures, but does it need to carry as much weight? I don't know. Well, I do.
Yeah, hopefully part of this curriculum review that's taking place, because I think assessment is on the agenda. Basically they just got to get Richard Selfridge on some sort of think tank, and then he can just go, here's what me and Jamie thinking.
So I was lucky enough to work with Richard Selfridge last year, because he does he'll do a term in schools, and he was in year 5 at the same time I was, so he was one of my partner teachers in the same year group. So we had PPA together and everything. I was like, oh my goodness, you've been on Thinking Deeply About Primary Education podcast, and you've got a book. It's like fangirling him. But yeah, absolutely. And he used to talk about, what is the data for, and why do we need to collect it, and almost getting everybody to see the different purposes for data, because I think that they've all got muddled into one. So yeah, I'd champion him as well.
Wow. I mean, if I were his year group partner, I'd be like, have a dictaphone. It's like, do you mind if I record everything we talk about, please? And I'll just make notes.
Yeah, she's right. Very, very intelligent man. Very.
Yeah, he's fantastic too. And I think his book was released recently, wasn't it? The little guide to so definitely check
and
that out.
Data Proof Your School. While we're plugging his books, Data Proof Your School was really good as well.
I mean, we don't need to plug them. Those books sell themselves. If you want to have a sensible approach to the use of data in schools, fill your boots. So we've talked on a sort of subject leader level, slightly wider level. What strategies do you use to support teachers in effectively delivering the curriculum?
Again, the way that I work is that almost that bespoke, there's no silver bullets sort of approach, because I think it's about investing in the staff. What I do encourage both teachers and subject leaders that I've worked with is almost to think about their habits that they have, and almost trying just to, if there's one thing that we can slightly change. Some reading that I was doing from Peps McRae, and how he breaks things down and lean lesson planning, and that really stuck with me, because it's about almost like what you think, say, and do, isn't it? And if you're just doing something but you don't understand why, then it's not going to have the effect that you want. So one of the things that we've done recently in one of the schools is look at a gaps analysis for writing, and again, trying to reduce workload. And again, it's just a simple grid, but it's got on it, okay, I need to think about sentence structure, I need to think about audience and purpose, and to guide their thinking almost. And again, that's like your whole, almost like a bit like a whole class feedback sheet. And to me, it's almost giving them strategies that are easy to access. That doesn't mean that they have to go away and spend hours planning. They can actually implement that because it's about what they're thinking and it's to support their thinking. And that again has been really useful. Yeah, you almost like when you go to work with people, or I do anyway, you almost have that again, that bit of imposter syndrome that it's got to be all singing or dancing or sparkly. And actually sometimes the simplest things have the most impact. So that's my main go-to, simple strategies.
Yeah, because I can see how that can then, if you're talking about habits, you automatize that thinking process, that thought process, then eventually it becomes second nature, doesn't it? But if you've got like a template on which to think, but it's not an onerous, here's what's happening on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday plan, like you used to have to do, then I can see how that's really, really helpful for teachers.
And I think again, it's almost, for me, there's so much power in having conversations with staff and almost being the person that says, actually, I'm a bit confused by this as well. Should we look at it? It's things like your progression grids. I mentioned earlier about how, we invest a lot of time in documents, and sometimes we can get lost in our curriculum documents, and it's almost like you're drowning in it. But then who is that for, and what is that for? Well, to me, it's to guide the thinking. It's a thought process. But too often what we've done, and I've done this, is you're teaching in year 3 and you're going to teach geography. You go to year 3 geography, don't you? You go to that bit, oh, what am I teaching? And actually it's about taking a step back and thinking, what is geography as a whole? What is beautiful and unique about geography? What are the key things, your essentials, that you want to make sure that the children leave you understanding? So it's not just about the fact that you're teaching, I don't know, rivers, or teaching a different settlement. Actually, you want them to have that understanding within geography. So again, that's a investment maybe we need to make as a profession. Again, I'd hope that the government had come to that conclusion that if we were to invest in subject awareness, and I call it awareness rather than knowledge, because I think that we're so time poor and there's so much expectations on us that we can't always be aware of everything. So it's not, to me, it's not a deficit, it's just how can we be more aware of certain things? So again, talking through the documents with staff and just saying, right, okay, you might be teaching year 3, but hang on a minute, what is geography as a whole? That then means that they're going to be able to cut out some of the fluff that you don't need.
Do you do anything to give them the space and time as teachers to develop that awareness? In a way, Lloyd gives his teachers a day, I think, perhaps termly. Do you guys have the capacity to do anything like that, or any intention of it?
So that was something that we built into the teaching and learning communities, and that was almost having those discussions and really unpicking history and geography. What I know that some schools have then done is their subject leaders who attended the teaching and learning community, they've gone back into their schools and then they've worked with their staff on, okay, this is the essentials, this is the core of geography, this is what you need to be thinking about. So from my point, my place, almost my position, I don't necessarily have that influence to say, okay, teachers can have this day and this day, because that lies with the leaders in schools. But what I'm hopeful is that then trickles into everyday school practice and their development of the school.
It's been quite clear from talking to you that you are really well read on education. How do you stay current with the latest educational trends and research?
I'm going to be a bit of a quiet rebel about this because I think that the bit that I need to stay current with is what's the need in the classrooms and what's the need from the teachers and the leaders, and connect with my own experience. And then in that way, then I almost have that as my starting point to then look at research and educational trends. Because I think that, again, I think we've suffered quite a lot as a sector, primary particularly, in almost following trends, and perhaps they've not always been appropriate for what we need or fit for purpose. So my starting point would be, okay, what's the need in schools? What are leaders telling me? What do I lean in almost to my own experience, and then think, okay, what's out there now, or what has been out there that then we can draw on. Twitter, X, is a really good place for that. And it, again, just talking, reaching out to people like yourself. I've now, I think I've got to a point in my career where I've been in some really challenging schools that I'm never afraid to ask. Got to that point now where if I don't know, I want to connect with somebody that does, and I want to seek that out, and because it's not about me, it's about finding out the answer. So I do think that, leaning into what you know and what's in schools currently, before jumping on a trend, as it were.
Yeah, and even as I was writing that question, I was thinking trends isn't really the right word, but I need to leave it open enough. I mean, it has been absolutely lovely to talk to you about this, and I definitely think we could talk for a few hours more if we had the opportunity, but I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate your time today. So all I have to do is say thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And to everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.